I want to talk to you today about a topic that I typically don't mention a lot about, and it's mostly because there are a lot of Christians that can't handle this topic, but I feel like we've been pushed into a corner, and this needs to be discussed. So we're going to be talking about God and guns, and how in the world do these two things correlate and go together? See, there's so many people that want to associate guns with violence. They want to associate guns with evil, guns with danger, guns with lack of responsibility, etc. So what is the right Christian position on guns and gun ownership? Now, we know what the Christian position is when we're talking about responsibility or evil or good and evil or being violent or not being violent. But what about in relation to guns? Now, there is a very easy way to understand this, and it's just to read the entirety of the Bible and look at the Bible overall and see what God endorses or what he does not endorse. So I want to encourage you for a second to think back with me to the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden, God planted an angel there to guard the garden with a fiery sword. Now, this angel having this fiery sword, there had already been the war in heaven where the demons had been cast out. A third of the angels fell prey to turning against God, and God cast them out. He just cast them on down, and sadly, they live here amongst us. But the other 2/3 of the angel chose to stay with God and on God's side. And so these angels are pure angels, and the things that God creates has long-term value. So even when God cast people into hell, we know that it is for eternity. They bear God's image. And so when God creates a thing, he doesn't like to just make a thing go away. Well, how much more so when he creates something good? So like at the garden where you have this angel with the fiery sword, the angel is a good angel and he has a sword, which is an instrument of violence against evil. If you continue to read on through the scriptures, you're eventually going to come across where God sends out the death angel over Egypt and kills all the firstborn. We don't know exactly what weapon he had, but we know there that God had a good angel that would actually inflict violence upon the wicked or those that did not listen. If you get further into the scriptures, God sends out another angel who destroys 185,000 of Israel's enemy. I believe it was the Assyrians in one night, in one fatal swoop. This angel comes in there and inflicts violence against the evil ones. Well, then when you get down to the New Testament and Jesus is speaking and guiding his disciples, he says, we need some swords. And that's an odd thing for Jesus to say. And then the disciples run forward and they're like, hey, we've got two. And he says, that's enough. We also know that John the Baptist told the soldiers to actually be good soldiers. They said, what are we supposed to do now that we're, followers of God? And he said, well, go return and be good soldiers. And you never once see any of the soldiers that were converted. You're never told, or you never see them being told in the New Testament to convert to some non-violent job against evil. Just flat out violence against good people is bad. So the Bible never endorses that. But all throughout the scriptures, we see the infliction of violence upon wickedness. And if you get to the book of Revelation, this does not end. It is something still to come. And Jesus himself is even being described as going to rule with the rod of iron. And that's not just symbolic. Would he use this rod of iron? I think so. And then why in the world is the Bible referred to as a sword against wickedness and evil? So it should be very clear by now the Christian stance of God and guns are instruments that can inflict some severe violence against wickedness. So used by the right people in the right way at the right times is actually a God-blessed and ordained activity against wickedness. So should we get rid of things just because we're fearful of them? Just because they're dangerous? Now, there's some that would think that we should get rid of everything dangerous. But does that not include power tools? I almost can see the same person that is scared of guns also being scared of power tools. But do you know what happens when you use power tools? You become accustomed to them, and then you can use them for good projects. Should we get rid of Belgian horses? If you stand beside this mammoth horse that weighs, I believe, over 1,000 pounds, this big super horse, and he starts walking around and stomping and snorting, that can be a terrifying thing. Should we outlaw all Belgian horses? Or what about bulldozers? If you have ever been around a bulldozer while it is plowing earth and running over trees, that is a terrifying and very threatening experience. You feel so vulnerable because you can't even hide in a building. You know this bulldozer could come get you. But just because our disposition has fallen in our ability to understand masculinity or the purpose of power in our universe does not mean that we should get rid of dangerous things. The Bible says to go and subdue the earth. We should actually rather harness dangerous things for good reasons. So how do God and guns go together? I think it's obvious that the tools of power that are necessary to control evil should absolutely be endorsed by anyone who has read the Bible.